The phone on Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin's desk buzzed to life, shattering the quiet of the late Washington night. The city, usually bustling with activity, was now eerily silent, save for the occasional hum of a passing car or the distant wail of a siren. It was a call that signaled a potential turning point in the already volatile Middle East. The region, long a powder keg of political and military tensions, seemed to be teetering on the edge of a precipice. On the other end of the line was Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, his voice tense with urgency. The gravity of the situation was palpable, even through the static of the international call. The message was clear: Iran was preparing for a major attack. This was not a drill nor a false alarm, it was a stark reality that demanded immediate attention. Intelligence reports, corroborated by the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency, pointed to an imminent threat. Analysts had been working around the clock, piecing together fragments of information to form a coherent picture. The air crackled with the weight of the situation. Every word exchanged between Austin and Gallant carried the potential to alter the course of events dramatically. This was not merely an exchange of information, it was a prelude to action, a recognition that the simmering tensions between Israel and Iran were about to boil over. The stakes were higher than ever before, a recognition that the simmering tensions between Israel and Iran were about to boil over. For months, the region had been on edge, with each side watching the other's moves with increasing suspicion. For months, the region had been on edge. The streets of major cities were filled with an uneasy calm, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for the inevitable. Iran, fueled by a potent mix of anger and ambition, had stepped up its nuclear program, raising alarm bells in Western capitals. Protests within Iran had grown more frequent and more intense, reflecting the internal and external pressures the country faced. Israel, viewing Iran's nuclear aspirations as an existential threat, had grown increasingly impatient. Military preparations were ramped up, and the rhetoric from Israeli leaders became more strident. The late-night call between Austin and Gallant was a stark reminder that the Middle East remained a tinderbox. The slightest miscalculation could lead to a full-scale conflict, drawing in nations from around the world. The slightest spark could ignite a regional conflagration with global consequences. The world watched with bated breath, aware that the decisions made in these tense moments could shape the future of international relations. As the two defense chiefs discussed the intelligence and weighed their options, the gravity of the situation was inescapable. Every possible scenario was fraught with peril, and the margin for error was razor thin. The stakes were incredibly high. The wrong move could set off a chain reaction with devastating consequences, not just for the Middle East, but for the entire world. The wrong move could set off a chain reaction with devastating consequences. The image of falling dominoes came to mind, each one representing a nation or a region that could be pulled into the conflict. This was not just about Israel and Iran, it was about the balance of power in the Middle East and the credibility of the United States as a global security guarantor. The implications of this crisis extended far beyond the immediate region. The late-night conversation was just the beginning of a dangerous new chapter in the region's tumultuous history. The decisions made in the coming days and weeks would reverberate for years to come, shaping the geopolitical landscape in ways that were difficult to predict. Iran, under the watchful eye of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, found itself increasingly isolated. The nation, rich in history and culture, was now at the center of a geopolitical storm, with tensions escalating on multiple fronts. Khamenei, a deeply distrustful figure when it came to the West, had long viewed the United States as its primary adversary. His speeches, often charged with a palpable sense of mistrust, painted the U.S. as a malevolent force intent on undermining Iran's sovereignty. His pronouncements, often laced with anti-American rhetoric, had set the tone for Iran's defiant stance on the world stage. These speeches were not just political posturing, they were a reflection of a deeply ingrained belief system that saw the West as an existential threat. The DIA report, with its stark warnings about Iran's aggressive intentions, only served to deepen the divide. The document was a culmination of months of intelligence gathering, analysis, and strategic assessments. The report, based on a confluence of intelligence sources, painted a troubling picture of Iran's capabilities and intentions. It highlighted the sophisticated nature of Iran's military apparatus and its strategic ambitions in the region. It spoke of advanced weapons systems, clandestine networks operating across the region, and a willingness to use force to achieve its objectives. These revelations were alarming, suggesting a nation ready to assert its power through both overt and covert means. Khamenei, emboldened by what he perceived as waning U.S. influence in the region, had grown more assertive in his pronouncements. His confidence was bolstered by regional dynamics that seemed to favor Iran's strategic interests. His warnings to Israel were not empty threats. They were a reflection of Iran's determination to challenge the existing regional order. The rhetoric was matched by actions on the ground, with Iran's military and proxy forces becoming increasingly active. The DIA's assessment sent shockwaves through the intelligence community. Analysts and policymakers alike were forced to reconsider their understanding of Iran's strategic calculus. It confirmed the worst fears of many analysts. Iran was not just talking tough, it was preparing for a confrontation. Military drills and strategic deployments were clear indicators of a nation gearing up for potential conflict. The report's findings were clear and unambiguous. Iran's military capabilities were not just theoretical, they were operational and ready to be deployed. Iran posed a significant threat to U.S. interests and allies in the region. The strategic balance in the Middle East was at a tipping point, with Iran's actions threatening to destabilize an already volatile area. It was a wake-up call for policymakers in Washington, who had perhaps underestimated Iran's resolve. The urgency of the situation demanded a reassessment of U.S. strategy in the region. The situation was further complicated by Iran's internal dynamics. The nation was not just facing external pressures, it was also grappling with significant domestic challenges. The country was grappling with economic woes, social unrest, and political infighting. These internal issues were exacerbated by international sanctions and economic isolation. These internal pressures, combined with external threats, had created a volatile mix. The leadership in Tehran was under immense pressure to navigate these challenges while maintaining its defiant stance. Khamenei, facing growing dissent at home, saw an opportunity to rally his people against a common enemy, the United States and its allies. This external focus served to divert attention from domestic issues, uniting the populace against a perceived external threat. The Israeli response was swift and decisive, a testament to their military readiness and strategic planning. Acting on the intelligence provided, Israeli fighter jets, under a cloak of secrecy, carried out a series of surgical strikes against Iranian targets. These operations were meticulously planned to minimize collateral damage while achieving maximum impact. The details of the operation remained shrouded in secrecy, but the message was clear. Israel would not tolerate threats to its security. Military commanders emphasized the importance of precision and timing, ensuring that the strikes would be both effective and efficient. The strikes, while limited in scope, sent a powerful message of deterrence. The explosions lit up the night sky, a stark reminder of Israel's military capabilities and its resolve to protect its sovereignty. The immediate aftermath of the strikes was a mixture of confusion and defiance. Civilians scrambled for safety, emergency response teams rushed to the scenes, and the air was thick with tension and uncertainty. Iran, caught off guard by the speed and precision of the Israeli operation, initially downplayed the extent of the damage. Iranian officials held press conferences, attempting to project an image of control and resilience. However, as images of the destroyed facilities emerged, the true extent of the Israeli operation became apparent. Satellite images and aerial footage revealed the significant damage inflicted on key military and infrastructure targets. The strikes had targeted key infrastructure and military assets, dealing a significant blow to Iran's capabilities. The wreckage of military equipment and the destruction of strategic facilities underscored the effectiveness of the Israeli operation. The international community watched with bated breath. News outlets around the world provided continuous coverage, and global leaders convened to discuss the potential ramifications of the strikes. The strikes had the potential to escalate into a wider conflict, drawing in regional and global powers. The delicate balance of power in the Middle East was at risk, with military alliances and rivalries coming into sharp focus. The United Nations called for restraint, urging all parties to avoid actions that could further inflame the situation. Diplomatic efforts intensified, with peacekeeping forces on high alert and negotiations taking place behind closed doors. The United States, while publicly supporting Israel's right to defend itself, also emphasized the need for de-escalation. American officials held press conferences, reiterating their commitment to regional stability and urging both sides to exercise caution. The strikes marked a turning point in the already tense relationship between Israel and Iran. Historical grievances and ongoing disputes added layers of complexity to the situation, making diplomatic resolutions even more challenging. They demonstrated Israel's willingness to take unilateral military action to protect its interests. Military parades and strategy meetings highlighted Israel's preparedness and determination to act decisively when necessary. The strikes also underscored the fragility of the region's security architecture. Regional security meetings were convened and military bases were put on high alert, reflecting the heightened state of vigilance. With tensions running high, the risk of miscalculation and unintended escalation was very real. Diplomatic channels were flooded with urgent communications, and soldiers remained on high alert, ready to respond to any further developments. The coming days and weeks would be critical in determining whether the situation spiraled out of control. The world watched closely, hoping for a peaceful resolution but bracing for the possibility of further conflict. The United States, though not directly involved in the Israeli strikes, found itself thrust into the center of the crisis. The Biden administration, already grappling with multiple foreign policy challenges, was now faced with the prospect of another major conflict in the Middle East. The U.S. response was carefully calibrated, balancing support for Israel's security with the need to prevent a wider war. The Biden administration faced a complex set of calculations. On the one hand, it had to demonstrate unwavering support for Israel, a key ally in the region. On the other hand, it had to avoid getting dragged into a conflict that could quickly escalate and have disastrous consequences. The United States, still bearing the scars of its long wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, was wary of another military entanglement in the Middle East. President Biden, a seasoned foreign policy hand, opted for a multi-pronged approach. He ordered the deployment of additional U.S. troops and military assets to the region, both as a show of force and to deter further Iranian aggression. At the same time, he initiated a flurry of diplomatic activity, engaging with regional and world leaders to defuse the crisis. The U.S. intervention was not without its risks. Iran, already wary of American intentions, viewed the increased U.S. military presence as a provocation. The risk of miscalculation was high, as were the stakes involved. The United States was walking a tightrope, trying to deter Iran without provoking a wider conflict.